Hi, and welcome to A View from the Bed. This is a CHI St. Vincent podcast where we talk to real patients about their healthcare perspective. We know that your healthcare journey can be scary, so that's why we want to get their view on the good, the bad, and the ugly from diagnosis to recovery. Enjoy today's episode. Hey guys, and welcome back to our podcast, A View from the Bed. And you know, every month we never know what story we're going to hear or who we're going to talk to. But today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to have a two-parter with Felicia. And because she has a really, really important story that we want to tell that happened to her and her family. And so we're going to jump right into it. And as always, we hope you enjoy our next couple of podcasts with Felicia. So thank you so much, Felicia, for joining our podcast.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I mentioned what happened to you and your family. And so obviously you were not the patient in this instance. Who was the patient or is the patient?
My son, Eli.
Okay. How old is Eli?
Eli is 30 now.
Okay. So what happened?
On the evening of August 20th of 2022, Eli was meeting some of his friends in Hot Springs at the Splash Wine Bar, which he does a lot. And afterwards, I noticed we have the Life 360 on our phones.
Oh, yeah. That's great, by the way.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So I noticed, I thought, well, he's on his way home. I noticed he had left and he was starting to come home. He was at the gas station. So I just assumed he was getting gas or near a gas station. So I went and I turned a movie on and was watching it. It was about 11 o'clock at night or so. And I thought, well, I never heard his Harley drive back up. I never heard his motorcycle. So I get on there and I look on Life 360 and I noticed he's at CHI.
Oh.
And I call CHI and they said, yes, he's here. They're like, how did you know he was here? You know, we were trying to figure out who the next of kin family was. So that's how we found out where he was.
Oh, wow.
You know, we had gotten there as we were driving in. The road was blocked off with police officers. We had to drive kind of through that area where the accident had just happened.
Okay.
And
now, did you know at the time that when you drove through
that's where I realized he was last
Okay.
on the Life 360.
Okay.
So I figured that's what
you were starting to put two and two together.
Yes. So we get to the ER and they have us wait because they're actually working on him because he wasn't breathing when he came in and his heart had stopped.
Oh, wow.
So finally they get him stabilized and Dr. Paulus, who is his neurosurgeon now, also met us and brought us to a little room and explained he has a severe TBI or traumatic brain injury.
Oh, wow.
And he said, I said, well, then he said something about his neck, and I thought, oh my goodness, his neck is broke or something like that. It wasn't. He just said, how the brain was, had started swelling. Nothing else was hurt except his knee. He was not wearing a helmet.
Okay. Yeah.
But Dr. Paulus brought us into the ICU to be able to see him, and he's like, we don't know if he's going to make it or not.
Hello. That's hard news.
It's tough. It's so tough, and just seeing the worry on all the staff members' faces anyway, as a mom, you're like, okay, this is really touch and go at this moment.
Yeah.
They said to leave for a little while. They were going to try to get him stabilized to go to ICU.
Yeah.
So I actually came down here to my office for a bit.
Yeah.
And just kind of decompressed a little bit. And then when we got back, he had coded 3 times.
Oh, wow.
And the ER doctor or the ICU doctor told us, we have about an hour. We're going to have to start making some decisions.
Yeah.
So I went down to the chapel, which had become my sanctuary. Over these past, 2.5 years, that's my spot to go to. And I asked God, I said, he's yours. You love him. I love him, but you love him more. What do I do?
Yeah.
He said, I told him I need your guidance. So his answer was, plain as day to me, do not listen. And I didn't understand what that meant at the time.
Yeah.
So over the next days of ICU, Eli started breathing on his own. He was trying to breathe over the vent.
Okay.
They couldn't quite take him off of sedation because of his pain level would make his blood pressure go up. But slowly but surely, we started getting improvements. They started removing the chest tubes. They started having less pressures to keep his blood pressure up.
Yeah.
He wasn't really responding to pain stimulus, which they were worried about.
Okay.
But the more I think back, I'm thinking he was on fentanyl. He was on Oxy. He was on all these pain medications.
Yeah. He probably wasn't feeling it.
No. And we did have one of the neurologist nurses that would come in with this little sticky thing and go across his heel. She's like, well, you know, he's just not responding. He's just not responding. But I thought, you know, and I think that's what God meant by don't listen to him.
Yeah.
I think he had a different plan. I know he had a different plan for him.
Yeah.
So no matter what the normal was for people with injuries like his, I know there's going to be a different outcome for him. And I felt it.
Yeah. So, well, and you know, as a parent or as any family member, a spouse or anything, when you start to go through the emotional unraveling of balancing what you feel with what you need to do, he was so young.
Right.
Did you have a plan of if something were to happen to him, or did you have a conversation, you know, with your family member or spouse or partner or anyone to say, oh my goodness, like what are we going to do? Like if things do not go well?
Right. If things don't go well, you know, we knew he was going to be okay. We were going to be okay. It's just, you know, everybody has a time stamp on them, but we knew it wasn't his time.
Yeah.
And no matter what it took, we were going to keep fighting for him and be his support.
Yeah.
You know, at first, the caseworkers, this is one thing I do wish that caseworkers would do differently, would be there's a lot of traumatic brain injuries. And just be more proactive in trying to find some type of rehab first thing off, even if it means sending them to Houston or, you know, Georgia, where there are traumatic brain injury. That's what they do.
Yeah.
You know, just because the earlier you start rehab, the better.
Yeah.
Even if it is disorders of consciousness where they wake them up.
Sure.
You know, trying different things. We weren't offered any of that.
Okay.
It was state hospital or go home.
Yeah.
In state hospital because he had a trach, and not a lot of nursing homes will take trach patients.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, well, teach us what we need to do. Every time that he would try, he would get a little bit better and they would put him on the floor. He would end up in ICU, back in ICU. Dr. Mustafa, who is the medical director, was like, what is going on, Felicia? What is going on? I'm like, well, you know, they're overwhelmed over here. I said, they can't give medicines on time. They can't feed on time. They can't, you know, check on him every 4 hours for vitals. He's too critical to do that. So Dr. Mustafa said, well, you know what? We're going to train you and your family to take care of him. And at that time, they said, we're going to have him go home with you on a vent. So we had to learn how to operate the vent, how to do trach care, how to, you know, CPR, you know, all of the things that could happen, you know, that's different. And Dr. Mustafa said, we'll discharge you from ICU, which that usually doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So the ICU, head of ICU nurses, Sheila and Trish, were amazing. Sheila's like, I'm not used to discharging from ICU. Usually you go to the floor. But they got everything together that we needed, from the vent company to the supplies. That first night we got home, it was tough because he's on 15 medicines.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get the vent hooked up right. So I was having a meltdown, you know, in the middle of the floor, having a little bawling section because I'm like, I can't do this. And I was like, wait a minute. Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
But just take a breather.
Yeah.
Well, and then when they, you know, when you're preparing for him to come home for something like that, what did you have to do to your home to get him ready?
Well, we have a 2-car garage that was a den. And so we had converted the 2-car garage, which we went to my mom's home because that's somewhere we could move in pretty quick. And she had a den also.
Okay.
So we had to get the hospital bed, the Hoyer lifts, the home health nurses to come out, all the incontinence supplies, you know, everything.
Yeah.
We had to learn how to bathe him, to keep him turned, you know. We had, but like I said, Miss Sheila had gotten all that together for us.
Yeah.
And was like making a list. This is what you're going to need. This is what you're going to need to do. And that was so helpful.
Yeah.
Because you get home and you're like doing circles, like, what do I do? What do I do?
You know, well, no kidding, because you go from having this, you know, vibrant, active, you know, young adult to now 24/7
Care.
and not even, you know, breathing on his own at the when he's going home. And so I'm sure there was a moment of panic on, what do I do if he codes?
Yes.
You know, when I go home, you know, when we go home and things like that.
I think my daughter and myself have a little PTSD with the sound that the vents make. That like when we're in the hospital and I hear that and I'm like, because at night it would go off and I would have to tell him to breathe because he was apneic. He would stop breathing. Like, breathe, Eli, you know, and he would start back breathing. But I mean, we hear that and we're like, oh,
Yeah.
you know, shut up. We got to do something.
Yes.
But yeah, it was a learning experience. And his younger sister is actually his caregiver during the day. Well, I'm at work now, even.
How old is she?
She's 27.
Wow. That's, you know, that's a big responsibility.
It is.
But what a blessing.
Yes.
To have a close-knit family where really all hands on deck.
It is.
We all want to make sure we do what's right and what we feel in our hearts. And, you know, you brought up a really good point earlier about you have to listen to your own inner spiritual moral compass, especially if you're a spiritual person, because sometimes you have to make decisions that don't rationally to other people make sense.
Correct.
But you have to go with what you feel.
Right. Which there were a couple of naysayers in the ICU unit. They were older. And, you know, I spoke with one of the caregivers that, one of the patient care techs that had taken care of Eli a lot. And she's like, you know, it's just because that's what they normally see and that's how it usually turns out doesn't mean that's how it's going to be, you know. And, you know, the naysayers were like, oh, they're giving them false hope. They're doing this. They're doing that. When it doesn't always turn out the way they think it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
You know? So anyone that was negative was not allowed in his room.
Well, you know, I mean, any surgeon will tell you, and we talk about it on the podcast, is attitude can be everything.
Yes.
You know, how you're feeling about the recovery, even if you're the patient, but the family is just as important.
Yes.
Is, you know, how you're feeling about the outcome or how you're feeling about going through each of the steps.
Right.
But then on the opposite side, it's okay if you have a meltdown.
And we do. Yeah, we do. And that's okay. You just get right back up and go at it again. It actually feels good sometimes to have a meltdown. You know, sometimes you keep going and you don't stop to take care of even your own needs. And, you know, those meltdowns sometimes are just like a release, you know, and it's okay. And I tell my daughter that too. It's okay. It's okay. You know, you're going to do it.
And it doesn't mean that you don't believe in what you're doing.
Right.
It's just, it builds. And sometimes you just have to have that moment where you're just crying in the middle of the floor or, you know, going through a drive-thru at Burger King. And, you know, you're just, do you want cheese? Yes, I do want cheese.
That's funny. I was at Freddy's one time and I was driving home and I was having a moment and I was in Freddy's drive-thru. I was like, let me stop and get me some ice cream. You know? And for some reason, I don't know why, I just started crying. And I pulled up and the little girl at the thing said, ma'am, I'm going to need you to straighten your crown.
Oh.
And that just, okay, thank you. You know, just that little bit, just.
She was just your little spiritual angel.
She was.
Yeah.
She was.
Giving you a little bit. And
absolutely.
I think that's such a sweet point that it's okay as friends or family members of family members going through an intense time. Give words of encouragement. Drop them a text and just say, hey, I was just thinking about you. What can I do?
And we still get a lot of those.
Can I DoorDash you?
Yes.
You know, one thing I have found too is here in the South, we love to feed people.
Yes.
But what I started doing is I will just give people DoorDash gift cards because they might not want my casserole tonight or tomorrow, But by golly, a month from now, and they want that DoorDash pizza or whatever.
Yes.
So, like, change our strategies, guys. Like, get some DoorDash gift card.
Yeah. And if you're in the hospital and you don't want to, have to eat in the cafeteria, those DoorDash cards do come in handy because you can just call them and they'll deliver the food to the room if you're having to stay with. Like we still have hospital visits, so we have to go in for and we stay with Eli. But yes.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Or, here's another thought, a maid service.
Yeah.
Like,
Sure.
everybody get together and everybody buy like 1 month of maid service.
Yeah.
But, it's we try to get people on the podcast who watch to like get out of just like taking a casserole.
Yes. Absolutely.
Like
The gift cards are,
listen, somebody to come do laundry
yes.
would be awesome. Or a day for doggy daycare if somebody has pets.
Yes.
I mean, the handler lounge. Or,
just,
oh yeah, babysitter. Or offer to babysit.
yeah.
I mean, if you like children. But, listen, some people should not babysit.
Absolutely.
Just offer to do little things
Yes.
that are just hard during that time.
And, some of the things like Trish in the ICU, she would give us little vouchers to go eat in the cafeteria. Or, at night they would call me at 10 o'clock or I could call up there and they'd say, call me before you go to bed so we can let you know how things are going. And it just gave me a sense of I can rest tonight.
Yeah.
Because his dad and I were there from 6 a.m. to 8 o'clock at night every day.
Yeah.
He was in ICU. No one missed.
Yeah.
Someone
That's
was
a
with
lot.
him. And it was a lot.
It is.
So,
And hospitals are not the most comfortable place.
no.
So, it's even as a caregiver, I mean, you love that family member and would not do it any different. But I had a nurse one time tell me, this is the best place they can be. So go home and sleep. Because when they go home, they're going to need all of you.
Right.
And I think that is so true.
It is.
Yeah.
We still stay with him 24 hours just because a nurse can't be in there with him and he has seizures.
Oh, yeah.
So, and no one would know.
Yep.
And then he stops breathing when he has those and it's really scary. So that's why
You have to watch.
we watch. Like someone is with him, either sister or dad. Someone is there with him and he's in the hospital.
That feeling that you were describing when he went home and the sound of the vent, to help our viewers kind of understand what that kind of feels like. It came to my mind of, when you're a new parent and you go home with a baby for the first
That's
time.
exactly it.
Where you wake up and you're like, are they breathing?
Yeah.
Are they breathing?
Yeah.
Like feeling for the breath. And I'm sure it kind of feels like that
It's insane.
a little bit.
Same thing.
Yeah.
It's basically you're taking care of someone that can't do anything for themselves, which is like a newborn.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
Except it's a grown body. I mean, it's a big adult person that you have to. And, it's so important, too, to have those assist devices because when you're talking about a male child that's grown,
Right.
you're a pretty small stature.
Right. And he's 6'2" and 230.
That's a big boy.
Yeah.
To have to, when you think about turning them. And so what a great resource of the ICU nurses to say, hey, you will need these things.
Yes. And it helped tremendously. I mean, even like something to put between his knees that we order, it's like a wheel and it helps us turn him real easy.
Yeah.
Just little things like that. It made a huge difference. A huge difference. Yes.
So when you got him home, what was the prognosis at that time?
The brain is an odd organ. No one knows. He had youth on his side, him being younger on his side, and he was physically fit. He went to the gym twice a day. That made a difference.
Yeah.
We didn't know.
Yeah.
It was just not a
watching weight situation.
Yes, absolutely.
That's super scary.
Yeah, it is. It was just at first just trying to keep him alive.
Yeah.
Basically.
And it's a big, big thing.
Yeah, it is. It really is. When when I think about it, it's like, yeah, we're basically keeping him alive.
To see if his body's going to recover.
We wanted to give him that chance.
Yeah.
I had to give him that chance.
You have to.
Yep.
Well, guys, we're going to pause in Felicia's story.
because as you hear, they were keeping their son alive, and it was a full-time job. But come back next month, because this is not the end of the story, and you'll want to hear what happens next in Eli's chapter. So join us next month as we do part 2 with Felicia.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of A View from the Bed, A Patient's Perspective. We hope that you found it helpful. We hope that it helped you make your healthcare decisions. We hope that it made you feel a little more comfortable with your own journey. And we hope that you'll join us next time.